again, knowing that I have some part to play, some responsibility toward helping to make someone else's life a little bit lighter. And if I can do that by giving them a few hours or minutes of escape into a world I've created to experience the joy of what the hero enjoys at the end of the day, to kind of go through their struggles a little bit. It helps us all to sort of cope with our own. And right now, I'm just trying to take that responsibility full in hand and do it justice.
Disinformation is spreading.
There will be a surprise outbreak. Is the issue of pandemic.
No social distancing at all.
They said that they would express their concerns about the mask supply.
Where's the mask? Where's the glove?
A second wave is
we all need some good news.
This is a message for all the healthcare workers out there.
Thank you.
If you're looking for hope tonight, raise your hand. If you feel alone and don't understand, if you're fighting the fight of your life, then stand.
From Santa Rosa, California, this is 19 Stories. I'm Cheryl Holling. Micah Thomas is the CEO of Megaleio Media and the CEO and founder of Storymore, a new audio streaming service offering a diverse variety of audio stories that include drama, comedy, and family-friendly content. He's also an advocate in creating content for the blind and visually impaired, and how the audio industry is represented within that community. With over 17 years of combined broadcasting, video editing, sound engineering, marketing, graphic, and web design, Micah has developed a strong foundation in the creative content field that assists in driving innovation in brand building. I'm very excited to welcome Micah Thomas to 19 Stories.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Glad to be here.
I have to say that anyone who has the word story in their business name is intriguing to me. Thank you for taking the time to join me today, Micah. And how are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Doing fine on this beautiful day. Tell us where you are in the country where you're joining me from.
Today, we're having this call with me being in Birmingham, Alabama.
Very excited to talk about Storymore and your media company. But prior to that, I'm wondering if you can share what's going on in Birmingham with the Delta variant and if you're seeing any shelter-in-place directives reinstated as a result.
As of right now, there hasn't been any advancement in the local government to sort of combat this or to address it at this point. But it's not uncommon at this point in the country that we sort of follow everyone else's lead, so to speak. I could probably, you could take that any way you like, from a criticism or just from a statement of fact from me being here for so long. But from that standpoint, there hasn't been a lot of movement respecting any shelter-in-place orders or anything like that. So we'll kind of see what the coming days yield. But I do know that our local government is most likely going to be one of the last to make any adjustments, so to speak.
Going with a theme, of course, with 19 Stories and just touching on what's going on in different parts of the country and world. As I chat with my guests, it's such an interesting time given we do have this new variant, and I always like to check in with people and see how that's personally affecting them. And as the CEO of two entities, can you first tell us how your media company came to be and then how Storymore came into existence, as I imagine you have separate responsibilities with both companies?
Megaleio Media is actually the parent brand to Storymore. And the way the brand sort of developed obviously started with Megaleio first, and what it was at the time when we initiated or established the company. It was a sort of one-stop shop for marketing needs, essentially. We were very focused on brand development. That included, again, web design, graphic design, so lots of logos, helping small, medium business, nonprofits sort of establish their brand imaging. And, of course, if they needed any assistance in the audiovisual space for, commercials, these kinds of things, then we would get involved with production on that end as well. Help them along with a limited marketing plan where social media was concerned and all of that. So again, we wanted to try to be that one-stop shop for new brands that were just trying to get out there. As the brand developed, it turned out our SKU item that had the most success were logos and graphic design, which were mostly event flyers. Or flyers for events. So we decided to sort of chop off those other areas and then kind of focus on our most successful SKUs that we were getting the most business on. And then, of course, COVID-19 happened. But luckily, about 10 months to a year prior to that, I'd had a personal inspiration for a need that I had and added that component to the brand. And that was already moving so that by the time COVID-19 did come around on the rise, our event business, which was now basically shut down because nobody was having events, we already had, again, another leg of the company that was already well under development. The personal story of Storymore for me is that I've always loved audio dramas. As a kid, I always listened to radio dramas on the radio with my mom and dad riding in the car, that kind of thing. We listened to Focus on the Family at the time. This was back in the early 90s. They were a thriving media powerhouse in the faith-based space at the time, and they had a show called Adventures in Odyssey. And I grew up listening to those shows, and the quality was so good. The voice acting was so good. You were just immersed in these stories, the music, the sound effects. I mean, it really was a television show playing out in your head, inspired by the sounds and music and performance that they had mixed. So I've always been into them. I loved Focus at the time for the quality that they brought in. They expanded that into some other avenues and some other production offerings, C.S. Lewis and Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe, the whole Chronicles of Narnia series they did as audio dramas as well. So in any case, I was no stranger to the concept. And I remember going through a harder time personally. Me and my wife were one of those harsh American stories at the time where we had both cars were down, and broken down, this kind of thing. I'm walking here and there to get where we needed to go. And I was out of work at the time, other than just, building my brand at the time, which was, again, having a tremendous difficulty in the economy at that moment. And I was walking back from the bank, actually, back to my house, and I was looking for an audio drama on just anywhere I could find it, but nobody had it in an avenue that I could enjoy it. So I actually looked on YouTube. I did find the production, but I was using video data essentially when all I wanted was the audio. And that led me on a search during my walk to just find a Netflix-style solution for the audio dramas that I want. I've said to myself, I don't mind paying a subscription fee per month if I can just have all of my favorite audio dramas already curated in place. After searching various ends of the internet, I just didn't find anything that fit the exact niche of what I was looking for. And that's what led me to begin to create the brand. And to this day, I still think we have a pretty good, solid hold on the niche that we're attempting to carve in the market.
I would say so. And what's so interesting is to hear your inspiration for starting this, because I too, back in the day where I cut my teeth in public radio, and there used to be a show called Cobweb Corner with Don Brown. And not only did he play music that just wasn't being heard elsewhere, but he played fantastic old-time radio dramas of The Shadow and all the classic radio dramas that really is theater of the mind that actually we discussed on another platform today, you and I, with some other folks. I'd love for you to talk about, it's one thing to be a fan. It's another thing to be in, a lot of times what mother of invention, you were looking for something that you could personally listen to that fulfilled the need of what you were looking for. And I had a chance to listen to some of Juror Number 12, which is one of the fantastic dramas that is hosted on your platform, Storymore platform, which I understand you wrote, directed, and produced. Is all of the content produced under the umbrella of your media company for Storymore, or do you have contributing producers and acting troops?
Well, Storymore is considered its own production company brand. Essentially, that's the way we think of ourselves as a production company. The Megaleio auspices, so to speak, is more of, again, sort of the parental brand that just kind of manages overall branding for all the subsidiary brands. There are going to be some other emerging brand names to sort of run from that. Essentially, we're going to get back with our event flyer business and a couple of other wings that we have expectations for. But Storymore itself is just a production company that produces audio dramas. We just happen to have our own platform, essentially, to showcase our own works. That being said, though, there are three sort of variants to the content catalog that we have. Obviously, Storymore Originals, which we write, direct, and produce. There's also Storymore Original Productions, which is not quite the same as originals because the screenplays come from other authors. For instance, Diary of Marjorie Blake was written by P.J. Roscoe, an award-winning novelist in the UK. And we were able to approach her and come to a great licensing deal on taking her story and making an audio drama out of it, which is currently being played on Storymore and released every other Sunday. Then the other wing is actually just from independent or professional studios that have audio dramas. And again, they're simply not in distribution, or they are in distribution somewhere. And this is just another way for them to expand that audience or possibly expand their possibilities on monetization and so on and so forth. So again, you have those sort of three avenues that are feeding our ever-growing catalog.
Because the quality is exceptional. It really is good. And there's a lot of good content out there, both in podcasting and for some of the acting troupes producing their own material. You know, the content can be there, the acting can be there, but the quality isn't always there. So is this something that you, for the content that you produce, you personally do the engineering because that is in your background?
A lot of what we have currently on the platform has mostly been by my hands. I hope that doesn't come off as egotistical in any way. That's not
at all. No, that's why I asked.
But yeah, most of it was done by me. All of it was written by me. And these were done for a couple of different reasons. Number one, in the beginning, we didn't have a lot of money. So so I voiced a lot of the characters to save on what we had to do with voice actors in terms of payment. I wrote most of the stories and engineered most of all of it. The one half was the money. The other half was you just already have something in your head as exactly how you would want it to be.
Yeah.
And so I think that nobody will create your baby better than you will from that perspective. And my thought pattern was always, let me at least set the standard with what we're shooting for quality-wise. These are the stories I had in my head that I wanted to hear, that I wanted to sort of birth out into the world and really manifest on this subconscious plane. And so now they're starting to manifest, obviously, in reality, and people are able to hear what I've been hearing in my head the whole time. And it's at this point that we have been able to bring on additional audio engineers, and we have a international voice actor pool. We have actors from Canada, Cape Town, South Africa, London, England, LA, California, New York. So we're really pretty diverse on where our voice actors are heralding from. And so as a part of that, the brand is starting to emerge sort of out of those ashes of the beginning and really becoming a really on fire brand for the audio industry as it's beginning to develop and I would say evolve in entertainment today.
Well, let's talk about that for a moment, because it's one thing to be a fan and again, another thing to create content, but working with actors, especially on such an international basis, you have to kind of have an inkling and sensitivity of what it means to direct an actor. So for our listeners who may not be aware of what producing and directing such original content means, can you walk us through the process from script to launching?
It's funny, I would say the conception of the idea normally happens at any given time for me. So very similar to J.K. Rowling's, I have to quickly write down whatever the idea is, whether, pull out my iPhone, put it in notes or just scribble it on a piece of paper or whatever. And you just have that seed of the idea. And obviously you can come back later on and meditate it on a little more. In my case, though, it's normally always like an avalanche. The idea will hit me first, followed by the name of it, followed by the cover art, followed by all of this is going on in my head, followed by the actors and the characters, and then the actors that are in our pool I'd like to play, or even a Hollywood actor that I'd love to snag to get to do this particular role. And that's how it works. And then it's like a fire, so to speak. It just kind of grows as if somebody lit a match in my soul, and it starts burning brighter and brighter and faster. And as soon as I'm able to get to my computer, then I'll start writing. And whenever it's like that, I'm sort of in the zone because the story's already writing itself. It just happened to hit me at the grocery store or wherever I was at the time that the idea came around. It takes a totally different life once I start getting it on paper. Once I get into Photoshop and actually do cover art for it, it's like saying, forget about it. I'm going to run with this one until it's done. And so from there, I'll obviously do the screenplay. in intimate detail. I'm horrible at spell checking, and I run so fast with so much of what I do. I'm terrible at going back and proofreading. So I've been personally working on that because I'll get this whole huge screenplay done, with 60 or 70 pages or 100 and whatever pages it turns out to be. And obviously, I've got to go back, and now that the fire's sort of gone out from getting this whole thing written, having to go back and reread it is sometimes a task. But fire always reignites, and I get through it excitedly and make edits and all that kind of stuff and send it out. But from there, we do cast in the characters that we see that would work. It's very rare now that we have to audition because we already have a pool of people who have already auditioned. And our goal in the beginning was to get voice actors that could play 7 or 8 characters without anybody without anybody knowing that it was all the same person.
Sure.
We would rather hire 30 people who could voice 10 people apiece than to hire 300 who were very single in their delivery. So from that standpoint, we'll staff it out or cast it out with the people that we have, and then we'll begin work on teasers first and just have the idea, and then we kind of write that out in certain episodes, and we do it very sequentially, whereas movies are able to do the last scene first and then the third scene 2 weeks later, and we really don't work that way. It really is sequential. We try to do everything, scenes in order, the whole nine. There's just a different organic energy to that for some reason for us. Plus, it allows us to make changes along the way than have to go back and redo something because we did the last scene first or whatever. And we've learned very quickly in production that all sorts of things can happen that change your production plans anyway, whether it be with actors, they get a cold this week or whatever. So from there, we begin to we send these things out to the voice actors wherever they are in the world. They'll voice it in their own home studios. They do remote work. We don't have rehearsals really. We might have a rehearsal call every now and then on Zoom, but again, with so many different time zones, it's really difficult to do that. So we rely on our actors to just get the mood, follow the notes, get a minimal direction, and be able to turn back in a performance to us. They normally do. They normally send us about 3 or 4 reads or whatever, based on their inspiration at the time. And with that, we begin to edit those performances together. And to sort of close out this segment, I would just say that it's really impressive because that is the background of what we do. What comes out in the actual production, you would swear we were all together for a week and everybody was hearing everybody else's energy and all of that kind of thing because of the chemistry that actually flows through in the finished production, but that's never actually been the case. One key example is if you listen to Bandage and Badge, there is a sex scene within that particular show. It's rated R, so we say that up front. But in any case, the actress that played in that scene is in Cape Town, South Africa, and the other gentleman actor is in Chicago. They never met, never talked to each other. Never had the opportunity to do the scene together. They both just got independent copies of their scripts. They turned in their reads with all the extra emotion and moans included. And to this day, people are just floored by the fact that entire sex scene happened completely virtually with no rehearsal whatsoever and 2 totally independent performances. So it just goes to show the power of what good performance and good actors can do. And then you add in our piece in the middle to just kind of bring those things together.
Absolutely. That's remarkable. I really appreciate you taking time to walk us through that because when you do listen to it, you're thinking that you're all in a big studio and you've had time to rehearse and actors are playing off each other so well that it really is a testament to the amount of talent that you have to work with. Right. And another really incredible accomplishment to share is that Storymore is now, I understand, in 175 countries.
Right.
And has been heralded in Podcast Magazine and is gaining other interest as the Storymore brand brings light to this niche in the market. And also, you sent out an announcement today, and it's a bit of a momentous day for you in that you announced that Storymore is now, and there is a little bit of a typo in your announcement. I'll share it with you later. Yeah. Only because you brought it up. Only because you brought it up. So I'm just helping, the producer. So you announced that you're in partnership with National Podcast Association. So can you tell our listeners what the NPA is and what that means for Storymore?
Sure. The NBA is one of the fastest growing podcast networks in the domestic U.S. They showcase independent content creators and podcasters. They allow them to have the opportunity to network with each other, of course, but they also grant a great distribution network for marketing, workshops, other tools, resources, discounts through their partnerships, all things that just help independent podcasters become better, become more connected, and of course improve what it is that they do in their particular and respective offering. It's very diverse in the network that they are composing. You will see faith-based things. You will see people who are all the way to people who are involved in other practices, other religions. You will see things that are sports related, and then things that are cooking, and so on and so forth. It is a true representation of how diverse the entire podcasting community is. Our partnership with them reflects obviously the stories, the communities that they're bringing together, those who are independent podcast producers of the fiction space or audio drama or radio play space. So they get the opportunity to sort of go to the front of the line as far as our curation process goes. And so it's been really good for us, and obviously I think good for them, because they have an outlet for the stories that many of their podcasters would love to tell.
Beautiful. Congratulations and kudos to you.
Thank you so much. We're excited.
It is a very exciting accomplishment and partnership. And per my introduction, I mentioned that you're an advocate in creating content for the blind and visually impaired, and also how the audio industry is represented within that community, which is very exciting to me. My own father was involved with Theater for the Blind. So what does that mean for you? Can you elaborate on your involvement with it?
I myself am visually impaired. Growing up, I was legally blind as far as the state of Alabama standards go. My vision was 2200. I have albinism, which is a condition that takes away the sort of pigment of the skin, eyes, and hair. And so as a part of that, many people with albinism often deal with low vision or vision issues or problems, nystagmus, and several other things, possible glaucoma and other visual ailments, essentially, that are components or caused by not having the appropriate pigment in the skin to shield their eyes from the sun. So many babies with albinism, when they're born, that's probably the best they're going to see as far as that goes. And so the rest of it's just the rest is history as far as that goes. So for me, I was also involved with that. And so being low vision, I was eligible to go to Alabama School for the Blind, which I did for a couple of years. That's where I actually met my current wife, and who is a current voice actor and also the SVP of Blind Talent Development for Storymore. So we are probably one of the only I'll venture to say maybe the only, but I'll say one of the only, just to be safe, brands who has actually hired positions specifically for the blind and visually impaired community. And that's because we're all intimately tied into it. A great deal of our voice talent workforce is blind. Again, these are people who would love to get out and work in other capacities, but you probably don't trust somebody who's blind doing your surgery. So essentially they're at home most times trying to figure out their way in the world, and using their voice is one of the opportunities that they can take advantage of. And there's no concern about their sort of camera aesthetic appeal, if you would. There's no concern about some of their technical skills with their hands. All they have to do is be able to read, to be able to talk, to be able to feel, and to be able to express themselves and express those emotions through a microphone across to listeners on the other side. So we believe this could be a great catalyst for future employment for the blind and visually impaired, again, who might not get opportunities in other spaces.
And what a beautiful outlet to provide for them, and certainly your sensitivity to how you grew up and the challenges that I imagine you had.
Definitely.
And, again, sometimes necessity is the mother of invention, and you have an empathy towards this community, and you're not just creating an avenue for yourself and for your wife, but you're creating it for like-minded souls, if you will, to be able to express their creativity. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. And thank you for sharing that about yourself, and also how you've created a platform for other people to have an outlet that they may not have out in, quote, the real world. And so, you've achieved some really great things. Obviously, you've alluded to a time that you and sounds like your first wife went through. And I'm curious, given that time, certainly not to live in that time, but to maybe share how it got you to the point where you're at now. But was there an element of fear during that time that propelled you into where you're at now? And what skill sets did you rely on to get you through it?
Well, truthfully, and I'd probably go back extensive as you mentioned. My current wife. Well, let me correct. My current wife was the one I actually met at Alabama School for the Blind. However, my first wife I actually married in 2004, and the issues were the same. Just really difficult time financially, really difficult time finding work, all of these kinds of things, and most importantly, we were just sort of two different people that began to gravitate toward our own directions. For me, it's always been the creative arts, whether that be audiovisual work, graphic design, whatever the case may be. Web development has always been a passion of mine as far back as I can remember. And like chefs go to the kitchen, for me, I go to Photoshop or to go snoop around online and I view the web differently, I guess, than some other people, because I'm often looking at, man, that was a really cool color scheme they used, or man, that was a great thing the designer did there. I think that's innovative. I think that's really cool. That helps with intuitive, or it helps with the intuitive design flow of this particular website. Those are the things that I look at. And same thing for when I'm listening to audio. So for me, hearing stories, as you mentioned, we talked a little earlier on another platform, it's always been healing for me. It's always been helpful. It's always been something that has sort of ministered to my soul, if you will, to just hear a great story. I appreciate the visuals and all of that, but it's always been the audio for me. And my journey of life has led me to this place where I realize that, yes, audio production is where it's at. I'll still get involved with films and independent film work, and I appreciate all of the wonder that visuals can bring. But as someone who has always been sort of visually impaired, the beauty of sound has always been something that's been sort of primary to me, which is why audio dramas make sense for me in my life and in the life of so many others. So in marrying my current wife and all of that, and we've even had our rocky times, through life and whatnot, audio drama and hearing others' stories through podcasts or through, radio plays or whatever. And even like you mentioned, some of the classic shows, Johnny Dollar, Shadow.
Yes, yeah.
The actors were just tremendous. CBS Radio Theater with Cecil B. DeMille and Gunsmoke. All of these shows had those human stories and elements. And so when I was walking that day with car broke down and walking from the bank, to deposit a very small check, and this was probably a 4-mile walk to get back home, in what was the summertime, I believe, or I remember that it was like 90 something. So, I'm walking down the road and again, just looking for something that while I'm going through this difficult time can strengthen me. And to not see it out there to the standard that I saw it in my head, granted a great opportunity that I know there were probably others looking for a similar solution for something that they could gain quick, easy access to that could minister to their soul in the midst of difficult times. We all escape into stories. And so that's what we're trying to create with Storymore, is a simple portal that people can access at any point in time to escape their current realities. We can't all get to Disney at the drop of a hat like we would like to, but all of us can pick up our phone, open an app, put in some earbuds or earphones, AirPods, whatever you have, and escape into a wonderfully crafted story.
Thank you for sharing that very vulnerable time in your life, and have absolutely been there, so I can identify with that. And, it's these times that inform us, these less than successful times that inform us of the next right step, right, if we're paying attention, and it certainly did for you. So if you had to pick one of the greatest achievements in your life thus far, professionally or otherwise, what would it be?
That is always a difficult question to essentially answer, obviously, because the right answer, right, is my kids the day I got married.
There's no right answer. There's no right answer. It's your answer.
So I put that on the record just so that's out there. I know my wife might hear this. So, but I would say it was actually just 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago at this point, at the time of this particular interview, we launched Storymore after 3 years of intensive work to get it to this point, we brought our core team down to Orlando, Florida. And for many of us, for all of us actually, that was our first time looking in each other's faces. Our entire team, our core management, senior staff for Storymore has all been remote from Tennessee, New York, Tampa. The only people that I have seen personally is the ones that worked in Orlando. And of course, a couple of those were friends and colleagues from previous jobs and that sort of thing. And we go down to Orlando a pretty good bit because it's like a second home, so to speak. But outside of that, the rest of the team has just been Zoom calls. So to bring those people again from all parts of the country to celebrate this moment that we all had been working for it, I would say for everything that I've put into it, that was probably one of the best moments of my life.
That's beautiful. I mean, and it shows you that when technology is used in the right way, how powerful it could be that that was the first time you sat down with your team.
Right.
And, I think you've probably heard it said before, if we all knew how big Zoom would have been, we would,
right?
yeah, exactly. But look what it afforded you to do. That is a remarkable testimony. And speaking of which, you alluded to your faith earlier with some of the radio dramas that you used to listen to as a child. And I'm curious if you have or rely on a particular faith to help you through this time or in your life.
The thing a lot of people might not know about me is I'm actually a Baptist minister and pastor of a small country church about 40 minutes from my house. Yes, I am. And of course, listen to some of the stories I wrote that might probably be in question. But
there's always where there's light, there's dark,
Right, exactly, right. And so, but I grew up in a faith-based household. We were the Christian faith, and my mom and dad did everything they could do to instill biblical principles in me, which, again, whether I'm able to stay as appropriate as I need to, as I've grown and tested out life and begin to stretch my legs a little bit, that might be in question, but I can safely say that for me, my faith has always been the core, the rock, the foundation of everything that I do. Even in the stories that I write for Storymore, because me personally, I also worked in Christian television for about 5 years for the world. At the time, the world's leading Christian network. And I've always sort of hated stories that were overly preachy, essentially, or the moral essential was so obvious, right? It took away from the entertainment and made it very bland to me. Not that the message was wrong, it's just how it was delivered seemed to have some sort of agenda behind it that wasn't genuine to the entertainment. And so even in my stories, I paint the stage and build the stage and paint the scenery around the world that we actually live in. And in that world that has sort of brought in and attracted these listeners, there may be some things that have been slipped in subconsciously to just give them something to think about, a little inspiration, a little hope in their lives. It might come from an extra character. It might come from a certain circumstance or situation. But at the end of it, I want to leave some seed in there that they will be able to sort of help develop their own faith wherever they are. So and as a side note to growing up with Adventures in Odyssey, which was a faith-based program, it goes to show that even as a kid, I listened to one of the main characters on the show called Connie Kendall, which is voiced by Katie Lee, who is also involved with Disney. She did Rolf on the Muppets. She was Sunny Gummy on the Gummy Bears. These are all shows that were cool when I was a kid. She was also on Darkwing Duck. Anybody that kind of grew up around late 1980s, early 90s knew all these shows. And she voiced a great deal of characters in every one of them. And now she's a Storymore actress and
beautiful.
And voices some of our things. And it's so cool to be able to see that. And were it not for our sort of start in this faith-based space and a lot of nights of prayer and belief and inspiration and hope, I don't think she would be a part of our team at this point today. So I just want to encourage anyone out there, continue to pursue what it is that you're doing. We're all on a journey of faith, regardless of essentially the religion that is the label of such. And that's the thing. I mean, even with the Storymore brand as a whole, we are attempting to reach into a bag of nostalgia. We want to reach into everybody's soul, even if they've been born in the 90s or early 2000s or 80s or whatever. all of us are going back to a moment in 1941 or 1939 where families were able to gather around an audible experience that took them on this ride, or took their soul, their mind, their emotions, their spirit on this wonderful ride of ups and downs that followed heroes and heroines. And we saw the challenges, we heard the emotion in their voices. And at the end of the story, we sat back and subconsciously said, what a ride. And that's what we're trying to reinvent and revive.
It's incredible that during a time when video, speaking of the church, I mean, even in services, video is becoming more and more a necessity in worship services because they're trying to draw in a younger generation that has grown up and weaned themselves on video. And everything from TikTok to Instagram stories to, I mean, every way with voiceover, especially so much demand for you to cultivate a video presence. How interesting that at a time when video really is in demand, that you have a platform that harkens back to a time that you just referenced where there was no video. You relied on storytelling and you did spend time with family. And this is not a paid endorsement, because I would love for See's Candy to be a paid endorsement, but they're celebrating their 100th anniversary this year and opening up new brick and mortar stores. And why? Because what happens when you walk into one of their stores? Right. How do you feel? What is the nostalgia? So again, this is not a plug. And anyone from C's listening to this, if you want to sponsor me, have at it. I work for chocolate. So I just want to say kudos to you on this platform and having the vision for it. And you've shared a lot of things that have pulled you through, and your faith, certainly. What makes you hopeful at this time?
What a question, because we're in this time where people are still searching for hope. And for so many, I personally have been sort of minimally impacted, I would say, by COVID-19, in the sense that I was already an entrepreneur, which comes with a certain degree of poverty to it anyway. So that's one thing. And then, separately, I really actually only personally lost one person that I knew to the virus. And of course, it was so sad to see that person go. He was 84, but I do feel if it weren't for the virus, we might have got, several more years out of him with as much energy and how sprite he was. But not all people came out with that kind of outcome out of 2020. And even 2021, they're trying to find their legs on how to go back to work and all of these kinds of things. So I'm not unaware of the difficulty out there on how it is to readjust to what everyone has referred to as the new normal. So for me, I internalize and begin to again pull on my personal faith in God, and also again knowing that I have some part to play, some responsibility toward helping to make someone else's life a little bit lighter. And if I can do that by giving them a few hours or minutes of escape into a world I've created, to experience the joy of what the hero enjoys at the end of the day, to kind of go through their struggles a little bit, it helps us all to sort of cope with our own. And right now I'm just trying to take that responsibility full in hand and do it justice.
What brings you joy?
Oh, that's a loaded question. No, truthfully, obviously my kids are great. I'm visually impaired. My wife is visually impaired. We also have a daughter who is 6 and has spina bifida. And she's absolutely terrible at telling jokes, but she tells them like nobody's business and laughs as if the punchline were absolutely funny,
That's
and
wonderful.
the thing is, the setup is always great. You swear it's going to be the best joke you ever heard. What did the pickle say to the crocodile? And you're like, oh, well, what? It's you're ready for it. And then she delivers this awful line about the postman or something. And you're like, what?
Totally non sequitur, right?
Yeah, right. And she will explode in laughter like it was the funniest thing. So obviously my kids bring me a lot of joy. All of them are so great. As a former Disney cast member, I always love when I can escape to Orlando and go back and visit the parks.
Wait a minute, because I didn't see any of that in my research for you. That's not something you just drop. A former Disney cast member
Yes,
Can
yes,
you
I did.
elaborate on that just a little bit?
Sure, just a little bit. Back in 2008 and 2009, I was actually a Jungle Cruise skipper at the Magic Kingdom, which is
Wonderful.
a little 10-minute boat ride where it's basically 10
Mhm.
minutes stand up. And of course, we had a script and that kind of thing. But what fun would that be if I didn't go off the script a little bit and get in trouble every now and then? So I've probably got a few write ups for being off the cuff. But at least every manager that brought me in said, "Hey, you know what? That's the funniest bit I ever heard. You just can't say it out here." But it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that, and I had a short stint back in 2016 where I also worked for the Disney Reservation Center. So if you were calling in to plan a vacation, you were at least calling my department, and could have been possible I might have helped you out with booking a vacation. But in both cases, I simply love the company. I love what I did for the company, and appreciate sort of what the company has always stood for, which is magic and stories and helping people to escape. So it was probably the best role I've ever had, other than being CEO of Storymore.
No wonder you had this experience that informed you of the next right step, if you will, working for Disney. And there's nothing like a good tour guide
Oh yeah,
on any of the rides. When you get someone who
absolutely.
really loves their job, is good at it, can improv, do things off the cuff, and even if they are a little off script, but I understand Disney's pretty strict, the fact that you got away with any of it is pretty wonderful. So
Oh yeah.
well, thank you for sharing a little bit of
Nope.
that. Yeah, as a
Nope.
former astronaut, um,
That's awesome. I'm gonna take that in stride if that's how it's looked at. That is awesome.
like, yeah. I
That's
mean,
great.
because we're talking about radio drama and, being involved in theater arts and, there's this little bit of information about
Yeah,
working with Disney. So,
just a little bit.
and I bet you were the best reservationist. I mean, I could imagine calling into you. It was a blast making those reservations with
Had
you.
a ton of fun. I really did.
So if there was a soundtrack to your life, what
Mm.
would be on it and why?
Well, obviously, Eye of the Tiger has to be on there.
Obviously, that's what
You
I was
know,
thinking for you.
Don't stop believing my journey. These kinds of things.
Ooh,
My
Journey,
my
yeah.
blood type is actually be positive, and that's kind of my mantra for life. So just continuing to kind of be positive in the midst of difficult situations. I'm not an overly analytical person in the sense that I'm going to sit and think about everything that could go wrong or how to plan this or how to plan that. I kind of appreciate the fly by the seat of my pants approach where life is concerned. Obviously, I can't necessarily have that in business all the time, which is why I have so many others that are able to help me stay on track. But
Mhm.
in that sense, I can try to attribute myself a little bit to Walt Disney. I actually texted my CFO the other day, and we had a good laugh. I said, we're like the Disney brothers. I'm like Walt, and you're like Roy. I have all these wild, crazy ideas, and you figure out how to pay for them. And we actually got a great laugh out of it. But that's the fun in being able to get out there and do that. So I would say anything Disney related would fit in my soundtrack just for the positivity alone.
Can I get one of those brothers? Because that's a good counterpart to have. I've got lots of ideas too. I'm just saying.
They're out there somewhere. They're out there.
Is there something else that you'd like to talk about as it relates to this particular time in your life?
I would just probably take this moment to encourage any other entrepreneur out there. I know that so many people during this time have went out to start businesses, due to the virus and that kind of thing. Now they're laid off or whatever, and they're trying to figure out, how do I move during this time to be able to stand on my own and not have to return, to a 9 to 5 or whatever the case may be. Many podcasters are basically doing the same thing. Some of them are
Mhm.
successful at it, some
Yeah.
not. Some just do it as a passion on the side, whatever the case may be. I would encourage you with a couple of things. Number one, make sure that you work on building what it is that you're good at, and don't concern yourself with the money right away or the marketing. I would say from my experience, that's probably one of the biggest quote unquote mistakes that I made. I went to Los Angeles, Orlando, Chicago, making pitches after pitches after pitches to investors for this. That's time I could have been using to build the brand for what it was.
Mm.
One of the biggest things I kicked myself for when COVID first started was that, man, Storymore would have exploded during this time, but we weren't launched. We weren't there at that point. And so I would encourage anybody who's in that mode of thinking that, oh man, I got to go get money. I got to go and get investors. I got to do this. Don't worry about that. Worry about building what it is that you're doing, and then share that passion with others. The money will come. Somebody's going to come with a checkbook, and they're going to write it. And I'll never forget one of the things one of the investors that came along later told me, the money is not the hard part. It's actually building what you're doing that's the hard part, and not always does it require the funding. So I would just pass along that piece of information to anybody who's out there trying to sort of make those steps and build their brand.
Excellent advice. And one of the things I'd love for you to just touch on before we wrap up is the different ways people can subscribe to Storymore. Talk about the different levels or what it means to subscribe to Storymore.
Sure. So to try to be accommodating to as many people as possible, Storymore basically has 3 different tiers, but really 2 that we're looking at as far as this conversation. Anybody can go to storymore.com or download the Storymore app on the Apple App Store and Google Play for free and enjoy certain content without having to sign up for an account at all. We just give a little bit of access to visitors to be able to enjoy and come in and kind of get an idea of what our content is or the quality or something like that. You can listen to all the trailers for free, a couple of previews. There's even 1 or 2 items and a couple more that we're adding as well that are just completely free without having to register for an account or anything. So again, that's so we don't have to sort of do the free trial thing. Even though we do have one, you can be able to enjoy it without any commitment. You don't have to give your email, anything. Just come and enjoy a little bit of what might be there, right? And then secondly, we do have content where you just simply register for a free account, all right? And that allows us to be able to continue to let you know what's dropping out there and what's happening and all of that kind of thing, and so you sort of deepen your relationship with us. But also, it's for really great value. Everything is free on that particular tier, and there's a large offering. All of our classic radio is on there. Johnny Dollar, Suspense, The Shadow, the New Adventures of Michael Shane, and several other offerings that will be uploaded very, very soon. So you'll get the chance to enjoy that entire catalog of classic radio for those that love that, like me, and several other offerings that we have as well. You'll get a little taste of some of our Storymore originals and a couple of episodes there. And some from our third parties as well. And then, of course, we have our premium subscription, which today is still actually one of the lowest in terms of the leading industry standards. We're only $6.99 a month. So again, we're still coming in under Netflix, Hulu.
That's remarkable. It really is remarkable.
So you'll be able to get your subscription to our entire catalog month to month, cancel anytime, just like Netflix or anybody else. And of course, you can resubscribe at any time. So you got 3 great ways to at least enjoy and deepen your relationship with the Storymore brand.
I know people who spend more on a cup of coffee every day than than that subscription price. So that is awesome. Really generous of you. Well, Pastor Micah, in closing, I think the most important question, and I will have it in the show notes, is how can people get a hold of you?
Sure. Well, I'm not a hard guy to find, and I'm not sure I ever will be. But make sure that you reach out to me. I'm available on LinkedIn. I also have a couple of profile pages or public profile pages on Facebook. I also do a podcast, which will be relaunching in the next couple of weeks, called 24 Max, so that you can learn how to maximize your 24-hour day. These 24 hours is the only thing that all of us have, whether you're rich or poor. So you just have to figure out the secret sauce on how to maximize that. And I also have sort of a page where people can kind of follow basically everything that I'm doing, from business to, ministry things, to my music. I'm also a musician. So it's just kind of all of Micah sloshed in there at once. So, and on Twitter, you can also follow me at Micah ITCEO. Again, that's my name, Micah, MICAHITCEO on Twitter. I'm available on all platforms to continue to network with other professionals and colleagues and peers in the space, and just to get to know you with love. I'm a people person, so I'd love to connect.
I think we can sense you're a people person, and there might have to be a part 2, because I didn't know you were a musician. I didn't know you had a podcast. Normally, I'm pretty good at doing my due diligence and research on people, but those are 2, and of course, being an ex-Disney kid, so to speak. very rich and full life, many, many, many stories. Thus the reason Storymore. Pastor Micah Thomas, thank you so much for taking the time, because Lord knows in listening to you that you are very busy. I don't even know how you have time to plan your sermons, but seriously, and I'm sure you can probably pull from some of your Sunday mornings and get some good content out of that. But
right? So true. Life full of experiences, and Adam with these great scriptures, so it all works out well.
The names have been changed to protect the innocent.
There you go. You got it.
Yeah. Once again, thank you so much. I really appreciate this time. I'm so looking forward to how this unfolds for you. You're obviously experiencing some good and very well-earned, hard-earned and well-deserved success. And I think hard work and being rewarded for it does mean something. It really does. And so, gosh, a best future to you. I won't say a lot because it's coming through hard work, but look forward to more stories unfolding. Excellent content. I really want to point people towards Storymore, support the efforts and the work that you're doing. And I'm sure that we're going to stay in touch.
We definitely will.
Wonderful. Thank you again, Micah.
Thank you, Cheryl.
I'd also like to thank the following news outlets for the use of their clips in so aptly painting the picture of the fear that we're facing during this pandemic. BBC, PBS, Now This, UNESCO, and Some Good News. I especially want to thank Joel and Luke Smallbone, otherwise known as the Group for King and Country, for allowing me to use an excerpt of their song Together, which could not be a more hopeful and inspiring song for such a time as this. Finally, I'll leave you with the following from Proverbs 23:18. Surely there is a future, and your hope will not be cut off. If you like this episode of the podcast or any other episodes of 19 Stories, would you be so kind to leave me a nice word or two? You can do so on the podcast page of my website, soundsatchelstudios.com. I'll include your recorded review in a player that is featured there. I appreciate your time in doing so. Thank you again for joining me today. I look forward to sharing more stories on the next episode of 19 Stories from Fear to Hope. Until then, stay healthy and hopeful.
Together with our differences, together we are bolder, braver, stronger.